My name is Klaus Kratochwiller. I'm the CSO of Delta4. I'm happy to present you the digital drug discovery and development pipeline we are creating. So we are currently facing an explosion of information. There's a new biomedical paper every 25 seconds. There are 1.5 million publicly available sequenced human samples available. There are 50 published clinical trials every day. So this is really not even on the meta level, not on the individual raw data or patient level. This is really big data. On the other hand, you all are aware of the extreme attrition rates in pharma, the extreme inefficient research, that you have to start with a lot of individual compounds at the beginning. And then at the end, after 17 years, you have this incredible price tag of, on average, $2.6 billion for developing a marketed drug. So this leads to statements like this one of Jackie Hunter, the director of Benevolent AI, one of the unicorns in this area, that for an evidence-based industry, we actually don't use a lot of the evidence. And there's a huge amount of information out there that's just not being used for the drug discovery. And maybe that's about to change. So we have a little bit of a different take on AI, as you will see. We don't like the black box, but it's unquestioned. The information that is there has to be used for drug discovery. So just imagine you had all the information on available drugs out there, effects, side effects, unwanted, wanted side effects, adverse effects. And then on the other hand, you would also have all the information on disease mechanisms. What is the target of every disease? How does a disease look on the molecular landscape? And you would have a tool that brings these two entities together. We have created just that. We have basically created a search engine for new drugs. It has technology readiness level 9, which means it's a commercially viable software. You type in your disease and you get the repositioning suggestions in real time, screening a few million combinations of drugs and diseases, and that's not even counting combinations of drugs. And of course, we have a demo on that, but also, how do we do that? So that's kind of speed dating for drugs. We have built molecular models for diseases, approximately 3,000 of them, and on the other hand, according molecular models of drugs, approximately 2,000, and we can overlay them and interfere them and look for matches and proposed matches. And this is kind of what this software does. But we don't stop there. Usual AI or bioinformatic approaches usually stop at the point where they propose something and then it's just a computer fantasy. We bring in human intelligence at this point. The data scientist and an indication expert actually can go through this information that the software suggests a potential mode of action of this new drug and tells you exactly where would the drug address the disease mechanism, how would that work basically, what do you have to look for if you test the drug. And we bring in at this point already the in vitro and in vivo biomedical validation of this repositioning hypothesis, and we can do that really quickly. So we can bring down the complete process to approximately 6 months. And depending on the selected drug and the selected indication, the clinical trial afterwards would take something like 2 to 4 years. But then that, of course, can also be optimized because you have companion diagnostics, you have stratification criteria, you can do a much more intelligent clinical trial. And that, of course, leads to increased probability of success and to drastically reduced costs. So what can we do on our own? We can start developing our own assets, and opportunistically, we decided to start in orphan indications because that's the closest to the goal we can get. And we decided for something where we're very good at. Focal segmental glomerulosclerosis is a rare kidney disease that produces these lesions in the glomeruli of the kidney. Those are the tiny filtration devices that actually separate the toxic substances from the blood and produce the urine. And in this sclerosis, some of these glomeruli fail, and that leads to symptoms like overhydration, hyperlipidemia. It usually affects children, so we come from the pediatric field. This was one of our starting points. But on the other hand, it's also not so rare. So there's kind of an estimated up to 1 million patients worldwide, and then $8 billion market because, of course, these end-stage kidney disease patients are extremely expensive to treat. The focal segmental glomerulosclerosis, the FSGS in green, is kind of in a disease spectrum of kidney diseases where we think when we find a cure for FSGS, it might be very likely that this is also applicable for nephrotic syndrome, and then it's already not such a rare disease anymore. And even though we aim mainly for clinical proof of concept with this project, it might also be commercially viable in the first place. So, starting with this FSGS project where we think realistically we can address 240,000 of these available patients, we would like to parallelize based on disease selection criteria that the platform helps us with, and select a second project and a third project, ideally depending on the criteria. That's not only the molecular landscape, that's of course also the market size, increased patient size, patentability, and so on. And then, of course, there's a huge fantasy because there are an estimated 300 million patients worldwide with orphan diseases. And the platform can not only do orphan diseases, that's a question of resources. Of course, we can also go into hypertension or diabetes, but of course, then the clinical trials would be a bit more expensive. So a lot of people say, okay, what if the information is out there, the doctors would just prescribe the drug? How can you market a drug that already exists, and how can you market a substance that's already there? Off-label use is not so easy, especially. So first of all, when we leave the animal experiment, we will patent the drug. That's a very quick, straightforward process. Then very likely the drug will not be aspirin. So the selection criteria of the drug will, of course, involve the market situation, and maybe it will be a combination of drugs. Maybe it will have a dosage that's not available. It could also be a different formulation. So the thing is, it will simply not be readily available it's not something that you would simply prescribe and go around the new product. Just as a quick disclaimer. What's the business model? The business model is, in the first place, sell the assets that we can produce, and that's also why we're here, because we want to actually do that. And then on the way, potentially sell the platform or the company. Alternatively, if we can establish a viable pipeline, also an IPO would be possible, but that's further down the line. We are halfway into this first project. So until 2021, we would like to have the clinical proof of concept for the FSGS project. But in parallel, and this is why we are raising money, we would also like to start this project 2 and project 3 and select potentially very interesting diseases for these projects and parallelize the approach so that in 2022, 2023, we would have already a viable pipeline and allow scaling and selling the company. The team comprises of a strong interdisciplinary group of people. On the one hand, on the computational side, the people who develop the platform and are doing the analytics work, are working with the platform to produce the repositioning proposition. And on the other hand, the medical experimental validation. Here we have a leading pediatric nephrologist who has access to these patients, so we actually can treat these patients with the drug, and we will do that during the next year. We also have a person who published a Nature Medicine paper on one of the best animal models for FSGS, and we have exclusive access to this model. So here we have really a kind of perfect situation for this first project, and for other projects we have a very good background. On the business and pharma side, our CEO Kurt Herpel is here, our chairman of the board Walter Heindl. Both have a significant business background in pharma and in investment. Peter Turicek is on the global level in pharmaceutical, one of the top 20 pharmaceutical companies, and he's an intellectual property experts. So especially securing the IP for a repurposed drug is, of course, a challenge, but we have really leading people here in this area. So we had prior investments of our angel investor, 350K. That gets us somewhere in the middle of next year. But we would like, as I said, we would like to parallelize and start with other indications and use actually the power that is inherent in this platform. And that's why we're seeking for a 5 million Series A investment that would get us through this clinical proof of concept and would allow us to build a pipeline with 2 more drug candidates that would then also have significant evidence at the point where we reach this time. And there's also an overview how we would spend the funds. And with that, I would like to finish, and I'm very open for your questions.